This is Comic Conversation, and I'm your new host, Brandon. Yay! All right. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you enjoy having me. And we've got a big week in comics, big week for everything, Marvel, DC. But let's focus on Marvel right now, because the Thanos dust has cleared out of my eye. Disney MCU has set their timetable for movies, and we've seen a Spider-Man Far From Home trailer release. I'm excited because it's featuring one of my favorite villains, Mysterio. I know that's not everyone's favorite. He seems a punk to many, but he was one of the first Spider-Man villains I was introduced to, not in comics or movies or cartoons, but in the Spider-Man vs. the Sinister Six video game on the Nintendo Entertainment System. I am old, my friends. I am old. But I've been a big fan of him and his illusions, and maybe it's because I'm a theater major and a failed actor like Quentin Beck. But I relate to Mysterio. I like Mysterio, and I'm so excited to see him in the movie. And what a coincidence this week. Symbiote of Spiderman is out. Symbiote of Spiderman number 2 is out, featuring not just Peter Parker and his black costume, but the main antagonist of this series is Mysterio. I'm excited about it because I want to see where it'll take us. Because this comic takes place actually after Secret Wars. No, not the one that just passed now that turned Marvel into the all-new Marvel, but the one from the 80s. The first Marvel crossover of its time, ever. And that was when Spider-Man got his black costume. Of course, we know it becomes Venom. It's an alien symbiote. It's alive! But Spider-Man doesn't know that yet. Peter actually doesn't know that yet. And in the very first issue, which came out last month, we learned that Quentin Beck, Mysterio, after suffering many losses, and his final loss, it would seem, is getting ready to call it quits. He feels as pathetic as you all think he is. And unfortunately, there's a death in his latest scheme to just rob a bank that would make him rich. He really felt bad about it because he's never killed anyone before. That being said, while he's on the graveyard mourning the person that he is that he is responsible for the lost life of, Peter Parker notices him because he's there visiting Uncle Ben's grave. So, thinking that Mysterio knows it, he is truly Peter Parker, Spider-Man and Peter Parker are one and the same, he goes and finds Mysterio and attacks him later on. Not at the cemetery, that would be kind of rude. But he goes and attacks him, and this offends Mysterio. Mysterio is really there mourning. He was ready to call it quits, and now his hatred has been renewed for Spider-Man. And it's a very interesting take on Mysterio. After this attack, Mysterio manages to escape. Spider-Man feels bad, and he kind of runs away. But as he's feeling bad about what's happened, his attack on Mysterio that was unprovoked, what we see is that Mysterio notices the alien costume, the mask of Spider-Man, peel off on its own. And he knows that there's something up with this costume. Which leads us to today. We have Symbiote Spider-Man number 2 is out. We're seeing the continuation of this story. We see Mysterio planning, plotting, talks to a mutant that we've never heard before. He goes by the name of Hard Rock. Don't be a Hard Rock when you truly are a gem. I'm sorry, Lauryn Hill reference that you didn't ask for or need. But this man does become Hard Rock. He's a no-name guy. You've never heard of him. I didn't until reading this. He's not doing anything today. But this guy goes and takes some money from Mysterio to go and attack Spider-Man, and well, on his first try, almost succeeds. Was about to bust a cap in Spider-Man's head. Until the alien costume leaves the body of the host, Peter Parker, and defends him by suffocating this new villain, Hard Rock. And I believe, we don't actually see it in the panel, but I have reason to believe that his head exploded. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. All I know is I haven't seen Hard Rock ever again. Like we exist in the future. So I'm gonna say Hard Rock's dead. It's nice knowing you. But Mysterio is still seeing more and more about this costume that not even Peter knew about. He knows the symbiote is alive. Now this is new information that we're learning about Mysterio, and it makes me curious because Mysterio's kind of portrayed different ways as we've seen him over the years. Sometimes he's really, really sad and gets beat by people like the Power Pack, which is referenced in this. And I really enjoy that in these comics here, we reference the continuous history of Mysterio, that we're getting to know him. So this isn't a throwaway comic. It really makes me wonder what exactly we're going here. What is the climax that we will be experiencing? Why all this focus on Mysterio aside from the fact that there's a movie out? It's intriguing. And I'm curious if we will see Mysterio's involvement later on this summer when Marvel releases its Absolute Carnage story. Now that'll be focusing on Carnage, and we'll talk more about that in another episode. But since we're talking about Mysterio and his awareness of the symbiote, it makes me wonder, does he have plans for the symbiote? Does he have plans for Venom? Will he be involved in Absolute Carnage? I don't know, but I'm excited. And you should too, because Mysterio isn't just some throwaway villain. Yes, I've mentioned times when he's portrayed as sad, but there's also times when he's portrayed as being one of the most effective villains in the Marvel Universe when he really, really wants to be. He's gotten under the skin of Daredevil and allowed him to go crazy despite Matt Murdock's senses. We've seen him in Old Man Logan be responsible for the death of all of the X-Men when he convinced Logan that they were all actually villains. So when Mysterio wants to be, he is one of the most dangerous people out there, and you shouldn't take him for granted. And now with this movie out, Absolute Carnage out, and this series out by Peter David, Greg Land, Ivan Coelho, Jay Leistein, and Frank DeMarta, I'm excited to see what's coming out next, and you should be too. Are you? Are you? I hope you are. Check it out. I'm your host, Brandon Lewis. This has been Comic Conversation. Let's keep the conversation going. Comment below, like the page, share the video with your friends, and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.